And hi, welcome to this installment of the EpiDoc tutorials. For this session, our colleague Irene Vagionakis from the University of Bologna is going to show us how to use various TEI elements to encode epigraphic and similar abbreviations. And you can see her slide there. I'll hand you over to Irene now.
Okay, thank you. So now we are going to see how to encode abbreviations in EpiDoc, and this is quite important because the abbreviation markup is slightly more complex than other cases in EpiDoc, because when you have an abbreviation, and we're starting considering a simple abbreviation case, we have several elements, more than one element. Let's take, for example, AUG, standing for Augustus. We have AUG, which is the part of the abbreviation that is actually on the stone, and we encode this with the element abbr. And then we have Ustus, which is the part that needs to be expanded in order to resolve the word, and we encode this with the element ex. And then we have Augustus, which is the entire expanded word, which we encode with the element expan. So let's consider the same case here. You can see on the right that we have an expan surrounding the entire word, inside which we found nested first the abbreviation, so the abbr with aug, and then the x element with ustus. And thanks to this markup, we can decide then in the final outcome, so in our critical edition, to display Augustus with the round brackets around the expanded part, as we used to do in a printed canonical edition. But if we want to display it also in a diplomatic edition, we can decide to display only the abbr, only what is actually on the stone. So in this case, aug. Then we can have another different case, which is the unexpanded abbreviation. So, for example, we can have hor, standing for something that we do not know. So in this case, we are not using expan and x, we are just using the abbr element surrounding what is actually preserved on the stone. So in this case, just abbr surrounding hor. And as for the final transformed output of this encoding, we can have in a critical edition hor followed by round brackets with dashes saying that we do not know how to expand this segment. And otherwise, in the diplomatic edition, we can have just hor uppercase with nothing more. And let's consider now a third case, slightly more complex, which is aug with two g's, standing for Augusti duo. In this case, we have the same part which is on the stone, so aug with two g's, and this is what we encode with abbr. And we have the expansion, usti duo in this case, which is the x, as in the examples before. And we have the entirely expanded word, so Augusti duo inside the same expan. But in this case, the second G is peculiar because it is what we call an abbreviation mark. It's something that is written on the stone, but it's not part of the expanded final word. It's just a mark, a symbol standing for the plural, and not generally the plural, but in this case for two Augusti. We could also have had aug with three G's standing for 3 Augusti. So in this case, as you can see on the right, we have expan surrounding everything, and then we have abbr for what is actually on the stone, so aug with both the G's, then the expansion x with usti duo, but we encode the second G, so the one that is the abbreviation mark, with the element am, so marking it as an abbreviation mark. And why this is useful? Again, this is useful because in our final output, we can decide in a critical edition to have the first case, so Augusti duo with the expansion inside round brackets, but without printing the second G, which is just a mark saying us that the Augusti are 2. Otherwise, we can have a diplomatic edition with what is actually on the stone, so with both the G's without the expansion. So for summing up what we have said, we have 4 elements that can be used for marking up abbreviation. So the expan for the entire expanded word, the abbr for the part that is actually on the stone, the X for the parts that need to be expanded in order to resolve the word, and finally the M for the abbreviation mark, that could be symbols or characters. And I think that it's all about abbreviations. And
thank you, Irene.
do you want to add anything?
So the only thing I would add to that is that if you were to come to the question of how to mark up abbreviations via the TEI guidelines rather than coming via the EpiDoc guidelines, as the examples that Irene has shown follow, you would find there's 2 or 3 different ways of encoding different kinds of abbreviation recommended in the TEI guidelines. And the EpiDoc guidelines method that we've just shown, that Irene has just shown, is actually quite an innovation from TEI standards. So it's a slightly new way of doing it. The reason we think this is a neater way of encoding it is that because of the way we nest these 4 elements, on the one hand, we never need to repeat any characters. We never need to say the abbreviation is AUG and then the expansion is Augustus with the letters AUG written twice in the markup. So, by nesting it in that way, we don't need to. And the other thing that's neat about it is that any given element always means the same thing and is always transformed the same way if it's in the same sort of context. So the abbr element in a diplomatic transformation is always print the contents out in full, okay, and in uppercase, for example. But we don't have to say if it has an X after it, treat it differently. If it has an am inside it, treat it differently. It's always treated the same. So we think this is not the only way to encode abbreviations, but this is the EpiDoc way to encode abbreviations, and we think it's pretty neat.
Right.
Cool. Great. And thank you, Irene.